This podcast is sponsored by nobody. Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the early 80s themed horror sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today I will be welcoming back the awesome, the hilarious, the politically passionate, the pioneering, so many labels I could put on this awesome woman, and I am talking about Louise Palanker. Yes, she is the co-host of Media Path podcast with another guest of mine, Fritz Coleman. And I'm having her back on today, and we are going to nerd out on the entertainment of our youth, doing the usual film, television, music, and etc., talk, and I can't wait. I thought to myself, my God, since Louise, has all these awesome people on MediaPath, it's like, why not nerd out on, what she grew up watching, even though I can see it because, of who she has on and stuff, people she grew up watching and listening to and all of that fun stuff. And it's going to be another great conversation today. I can't wait. Yes. Oh my God. March Madness is winding down in a really awesome way. So yeah, here is my new interview with Louise Palanker. So, going back in time, do you remember the first movie that impacted you as a child?
Do I remember the first movie? The Chuck Connors version of Flipper?
Oh, yeah.
Pretty impactful. You just wanted to live there and have a dolphin.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that one. So that was the first one you saw that you were like, wow, this is a pretty powerful movie.
Well, to my little 4-year-old mind, I think that was pretty impactful. And then, of course, things like Swiss Family Robinson. They lived in a tree, these people.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty extraordinary. I love those types of adventure stories. And I really loved the wonderful world of color.
Mm-hmm.
And the movies they would show on there with all the kids having all those adventures. I liked real life stuff better than I liked things like Flubber or Flying Cars. Or, I loved Dick Van Dyke dancing anywhere, but I really liked the more realistic stuff. I liked water. I always liked anything that happened in the water. So when Flipper became a TV show, that was an instant favorite for me.
Yeah, Rico Browning, who was the underwater creature from the Black Lagoon, created Flipper, and I had him on a couple of years ago before he passed.
Oh my God.
Yeah, what an interesting career that guy had. He stayed in Florida his whole life, and he got to work in film and television. He directed, the water sequences in movies like Caddyshack and lots of stuff. And, yeah, he had a pretty interesting career. He also created Gentle Ben. Remember him?
Oh yeah, no, I know his name from the credits. So I loved Gentle Ben. Yeah. I loved Dennis Weaver. Those were the shows that I liked the best. Is sort of family shows with animals.
Did you have the $1 Million Movie growing up?
No, I don't know what the $1 Million Movie is.
Okay, it's more of an East Coast thing. They would show a movie like at 8 o'clock, I guess on a UHF station or something, and they would show whatever movies were being made up to that point in the 50s and 60s, and we had some version of it in my childhood in my local UHF stations and stuff. But yeah, I mean, they showed everything like the War of the Worlds and Houseboat with Cary Grant and The Day the Earth Stood Still. Lots of good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we had versions of that. I grew up in Buffalo, New York. We had versions of different movies that, would come on. As a kid, you're sort of restricted to whatever's on. There's nothing recorded. If your parents don't take you to the movie theater and you're not home, and also, back then, I don't know if kids today realize it, but if a movie came into the theater, it was 2 to 3 years before you ever saw it on TV.
Oh yeah.
So if you missed it during its run, you weren't, in your mind, it's just gone, because it's an eternity between being 9 and being 11. So you just want to get there. I remember I wanted to see this movie that had Ron Howard and Clint Howard in it. I thought that's just the dreamiest thing ever that could happen, is those two brothers in one movie. And I've still never seen the movie because we didn't make it to the movie theater, and I don't know, I never saw it on TV. So that's something I should probably look up and enjoy now that everything's available, right?
Right. Like when I was growing up and we got the first run of home video, a movie would come out anywhere from 7 months to a year and stuff. And by the time the 2000s came along, that went from 7 months to a year to literally 3 months now, and then 2 months eventually. It's crazy.
No. Yeah, now it's like, well, let's wait till next weekend. It'll be streaming.
Exactly. So the adventure genre was your favorite genre? Was there any others?
I loved anything with kids. And so, I definitely have my favorite actors and, grown-up actors. Like, I loved Fred Astaire and Fred McMurray. People named Fred, it turns out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I loved Dick Van Dyke, and I loved, Carol Burnett. I would watch Carol Burnett in anything, and I still would. So,
Yeah.
But I loved, when I was a kid, I just loved watching kid actors, and, the idea that, you could do this as a kid, that this could be something that you'd go to work on a movie set or a TV set was very, very interesting to me. And I think I would bug my mom about it a lot, that I wanted to be an actor. But we lived in Buffalo, and her response was that, that's an 8-hour drive into New York City,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not going to become an actor. So there went that dream. But, after watching that Hulu special on the Hulu documentary series, Quiet on the Set, I don't know if you've seen that yet.
I've heard about it, yeah.
Anyone who dreamed of being in show business and the parents wouldn't take them to auditions probably dodged a lot of bullets, because I don't know that show business is the safest place for kids.
Yeah, no, not anymore. At least not back then, especially.
No, not ever.
It got worse.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it already was bad, but it got worse, I think, by the time that situation happened.
Well, it was always bad, and it's always fraught, and it still is. But that situation at Nickelodeon was a case of they were isolated enough from the rest of show business to write and create their own rules that were extremely reckless and dangerous and inviting to an element that isn't around children for any of the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And parents weren't watching the channel, so they didn't even see all of the sexual innuendo that was baked into these programs. So it went on in isolation for way too long. But I was watching a TikTok video last night that Danny Pintaro did, and he said, his heart goes out to everybody, but nothing remotely close to that ever happened to him, and he is so grateful to all the people who played his parents and to his actual parents.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a completely different experience, and I know a lot of former child actors did. But
yeah,
your parents have to be on top of it. We interviewed Patrick Laberto a couple weeks ago, and both he and his brother were in show business throughout their childhood, and he said his mom, he'd say, like, hey, can we go to this, can we go to that? And his mom would just simply look at the two of them and say, not safe.
Yeah.
And he didn't go and wouldn't go. And so if your parents are on top of it and really aware of behavior that seems off, I think it can be okay. But it's really the only activity that your children can participate in where money is being made, A, and B, your child's performance is what is creating income for a whole bunch of people. So your child's ability to perform or not perform, there's so many different adults dependent upon that for their income, and that's just too much for most children. It's just too much pressure.
It is awful. Patrick's a sweet guy, and I've gotten to know so many child actors from doing the podcast. There's quite a number of them that are messed up, and quite a number of them who are well adjusted. And yeah, it's really sad of what's going on with that. Were you a Disney kid? You were into Disney and stuff.
I mean, I wasn't a tremendously like specific Disney kid. I mean, I loved Leave It to Beaver and My Three Sons, and you know, I loved any show. I loved Julia. I loved any show with kids, and then I love and I loved some of the adventure shows too, but like Lost in Space.
Mm-hmm. That's
but
a good one.
I think more of like showing kids in a realistic setting was more of what I was into.
Yeah.
And in the movies or the TV shows that I'm drawn to today, like I would rather watch This Is Us than any police detective procedural drama. Like I'd rather see what's happening in this real life family. What are some of the themes that are explored? I'd rather see real people in encountering a challenge than to see something supernatural or so that was always my my preferred entertainment was something that depicted a portion of real life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a generation, behind you, but like, I grew up on, The Goonies and Stand By Me and all
Yeah.
these kids-focused movies. There's this one, most people don't remember it. It was called Rooskies. It was about these four kids. They're like 12-year-olds or something. In the summer of '65, I think it is. They meet this Russian immigrant who's hiding from the government, and they hide him. And stuff. It was a cute little thriller there. But yeah, I mean, I grew up on all that stuff, and then at a certain point, they stopped making those kinds of movies and stuff. And then next thing you know, Britney Spears is popular, and then there's all these like girl focused kids shows like Hannah Montana and stuff. And by that point, I was grown up and I was checked out. By that point,
Yeah. I've never watched an episode of Hannah Montana, but I've seen enough clips to recognize that Miley Cyrus is really funny, and so I think that oh, I think my power just came on. That was fast.
Yeah.
They told me maybe 2 hours. So excuse me if things start beeping and whirring and whatever because my power just came back on.
I get it.
Yeah. Miley Cyrus she's a talented performer. So I do appreciate giving shows to people who are good. So I don't know what Hannah Montana was about other than she had two different identities, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I think those were worthy shows that I would have enjoyed if I had still been a kid.
Remember when ABC used to play James Bond movies like each month for like 25 years?
Not really, because I wasn't into like spy stuff.
Okay. Yeah, because I got to see the tail end of that, and lately I've just been so nostalgic for Bond because I was disappointed by the last one. So like I've been buying James Bond movies online that I've always loved and stuff, and so yeah, I'm a big Bond guy.
Okay.
Did you have a local TV horror host where you were at?
I don't remember that too much because I wasn't into horror.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't help you there. I don't remember. We had, the kid shows were, we had the typical hometown morning show for kids. Mm-hmm. Ours was called Rocket Ship 7.
Uh-huh.
And it was hosted by Dave Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
And when you got old enough to stay up and watch the news, you realized that he was the weatherman, mm-hmm. which was astounding. And then the same thing happened with the show that came on after school, which was called was it called Rocket Ship 7 or I don't remember, but it was hosted by a guy called Commander Tom. And it was, I guess they both had puppets and I don't know what all else was going on. Maybe they would cut to cartoons. I'm not sure. But then it turned out that Commander Tom was also a weatherman. Mm-hmm. So those were revelations for a child to find out that your your kid guy, your TV, afternoon hosty guy was also a grown-up weatherman. But they had many hats in local TV, didn't they?
Oh yeah, look at Fritz. You know.
I don't know that Fritz ever had a morning show, but I'm sure he could have pulled it off, with style.
Well, he had comedy. He had that talk show for a while. I mean,
right?
That's being busy.
Oh yeah, because usually the weather guy is the funniest guy. So
yeah, I know. Even Letterman, he started out doing weather locally before he came out to L.A. and started doing comedy.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you remember your first drive-in movie experience?
I don't remember my first, but it was something that we did periodically. I'm trying to remember if, somehow I don't think you have a strong memory of the movie because we had 4 kids and there was so much going on in the car that you kind of remember the speaker and your dad trying to get it to work and then going into like the snack bar because you got to walk through all the other cars to get there. And that was exciting, but I don't know that you remember the movie. I just don't remember the movies. I just remember being at the drive-in.
I was 2 years old. My parents started taking me to the drive-in. They took me to see Weird Science and Rambo 2. I kind of remember it a little bit. I remember a lot of things starting like at the age of 1. I'm not Mary Lou Henner, but I can remember an awful lot from my early childhood days. But yeah, I mean, after a while, they stopped taking me because they got to a point where I was either sleeping in the car or getting out of the car and knocking on windshields.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I got fidgety. I was a fidgety little kid, I'll tell you. Yeah, I remember the first time I saw Charlie Chaplin. My mom had to go to the snack bar and complain about something, and she took me with her, and there was a stand-up cardboard poster of Charlie Chaplin. It was for Bagley's Cookies, and I was like, "Hey, Mommy, I want a cookie just like that man has." And she was like, "You don't get a cookie, I'm mad."
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It was a long time ago. But yeah, that ended up being one of the last times they took me for a couple of years, I remember. And then by the time I was 6.5, I was up throughout the entire movie and always had fun going to the drive-in with my dad.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely exciting. We had our pajamas on. I remember that was a big thing so that you could just, whoever fell asleep could just get carried back into the house.
Yeah, and it got to a point near the end where if you didn't want to use those dated speaker phones to listen to the movie, they had a code where you could program it into your car radio and listen to it there.
Yeah, no, I knew it had evolved to that point, but I hadn't been to a drive-in to witness that.
Yeah, they still exist in some places. Like over here in the Bay Area, there's one in San Jose that's been around forever. As soon as a movie comes out that's worth seeing, I'm going to go check it out.
Oh, yeah. That sounds fun.
I remember the last time we talked, you told me your mom used to take you to musicals.
Yes.
Yeah. Like Broadway musicals?
Well, we lived in Buffalo. It's an 8-hour drive away from New York City, so I would be in New York maybe occasionally, but she would take us to some touring version of whatever. There was a theater in downtown Buffalo called the Studio Arena Theater.
Mm-hmm.
And so she would take us to see anything like Man of La Mancha, The Sound of Music, Oliver, anything that, because we had all the cast albums from Broadway. So anytime anything came around Buffalo that she thought we would like, The Music Man, she would take us. Mm-hmm. So I don't think I got to see a Broadway show very often. I can't remember seeing a Broadway show as a child. I don't have that memory, but we went often to the Buffalo touring version.
Yeah, I mean, musicals have been a part of my life forever. I mean, I love Grease and West Side Story and The Sound of Music and Jesus Christ Superstar, Annie, My Fair Lady, a lot of good ones.
Oh, yeah, I love all that stuff.
Yeah, I auditioned for The Sound of Music in high school. Not my finest moment, I'll tell you. I can't sing or dance. But 2 years later, I did stage crew for the Pajama Game. And me and the other prop handler, we would hear the same songs over and over again. So we would entertain ourselves by telling ourselves very highly offensive jokes. And then pretty soon, we were going into dressing rooms and telling the actors, and they were telling us even worse ones.
Oh my god.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about how, remember when the 70s came, like shows started to become very controversial, very bawdy, and they were like right in the middle of the sexual revolution and women's lib, like Oh Calcutta. Did you see that show?
No, I didn't. I had no interest in seeing stuff that was considered racy.
Uh huh.
So I was a pretty tender child. So if something was considered like not good for kids, I was like, all right, I'm good. Don't. Yeah, I had no curiosity about any of that stuff at a young age. I was ready to grow up nice and slow.
I was the complete opposite of that because I figured, okay, if it's bad for kids, then why are adults doing it? Especially if it's just visual, it's not like drinking a beer or smoking a cigarette, So like I rented the videotape performance of O Calcutta when I was like 12 or 13, and I was like, wow. I mean, the photography was awful because it was an old VHS analog and stuff, but still, it was something.
Oh, I bet.
Now, getting into television, like in the 60s, you had all the fantasy based sitcoms like I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched and F Troop and Hogan's Heroes and The Munsters and Addams Family. Like, were you into those?
I mean, if they were on, you'd watch whatever was on. But I wasn't a huge fan of the Munsters or the Addams Family. I wasn't a big fan of things that were not realistic. I guess I wasn't a big fantasy person.
Hmm. Yeah, my dad was born in '57, so we watched all of those on Nick at Night and TBS Superstation, along with Green Acres and Many Lives of Toby Gillis and Patty Duke and Donna Reed and all that stuff. It's funny how in the '50s you had all these American sitcoms that were represented as squeaky clean. Then you get to the '60s, you get the fantasy sitcoms, and then when the '70s come along, you get Norman Lear, Gary Marshall, James Comack. They're making all these very broad comedy shows about social issues, and that carries all the way into the '80s. It's amazing how they changed that landscape.
Absolutely, that's the thing about entertainment is it's so ever changing, and it's never super clear whether our culture is a reflection of our entertainment or our entertainment is a reflection of our culture. Like who's pulling the wagon, and
Hmm.
I think it's this conversation that's a loop rather than one pulling the other. And we're especially experiencing that during the digital age where the loop is much more furiously rapid, right?
Hmm. Speaking of variety, did you like watch Laugh-In?
I mean, I wasn't that into laughing. I guess I didn't get it, or I thought it was,
Silly?
or I didn't get a lot of a lot of the jokes were puns with sexual innuendos,
Yeah.
and kids on my bus were saying "sock it to me," and I didn't know if that was sexual.
Yeah.
And also, I think Laughing, if we look at the schedule, we could probably see, but it was on up against something else that I watched.
Uh huh.
So I was into the Smothers Brothers. That
Oh.
was I thought that was smarter
Hmm.
and more wickedly satirical of things that I was aware of what they were up to. I felt like Laughing was telling some joke that I didn't get,
Yeah.
that I would get when I was older. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just complete silliness,
Yeah.
in retrospect.
Yeah, I love the Smothers Brothers too. You probably remember when the Who was on and they caused a ruckus.
Oh yeah, no, the Smothers Brothers that was my jam. I loved that, and it happened. It came on. And my bedtime was in the middle, like at
Hmm.
9:30, and I was always begging if I could stay up another half hour to watch the rest of the Smothers Brothers, and if the answer was no, I would stand in the hallway and listen. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely something. I loved Carol Burnett's show. I loved the variety shows. I loved all of that stuff. But Laugh-In was just a little too out there for my little brain.
Yeah. Oh God. Something R-rated would come on. I would have to go in my room, but I would just listen to the door. So I totally relate to that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I didn't. You know, because it was on once, mm-hmm. and if you didn't see it, you missed it.
Yeah.
So for me, you know, missing something was pretty tragic because I thought it went into the airwaves. It didn't go into my little mind, and now it's gone. So that, you know, we did have like this interesting phenomenon in Buffalo where you could get TV channels from Toronto, mm-hmm. and they would get the shows a couple days ahead of the States. Mm-hmm. So it was very fuzzy, and there was a lot of snow on the TV screen.
Right.
But you could sometimes get a show and get to watch it twice if you got it on Canadian TV, you know, before it came on American TV. But other than that, that was the kind of thing where, like, if you missed it, you missed it. I remember skipping. My mom had signed me up for this acting class at the Studio Arena Theater for kids, and I would take the bus from my school downtown. And I had a TV guide, and I would circle everything. You probably did this too, or maybe you're too young to have had the TV guide, but I would circle everything that I didn't want to miss.
I had it.
Yeah. And the Cowsills were going to be on the Mike Douglas show on the day that I was supposed to be at my acting class. So I took the bus downtown. I got off the bus. I didn't go to the Studio Arena acting school. I went to a department store where all the TVs were, and they weren't turned to the right channel. So I tried to change the channel on the TV in the department store, and this woman smacks my hand away. Mm-hmm. So I waited till she wasn't looking. I turned the channel. I watched the Cowsills on the Mike Douglas show. I remember everything about that moment. I remember the song that they performed. I remember going down the escalator, and coming up the escalator on the other side was a friend of my mom's. And I was like, oh man, this is like a Leave It to Beaver episode where someone sees me. But, you know, and so I saw Louise at the mall, you know, and she was supposed to be at acting school. But that was this desperate feeling of like, if I miss this, it's gone, and I will have missed it. And so I wasn't a rebellious child, but that was the choice I made in that moment, was to forego acting school to see the Cowsills on Mike Douglas.
Oh my God, that's so awesome. Do you remember the names of any of those Canadian shows you watched?
Well, Canada had its own shows, but they would get American shows a day before, 2 or maybe. It always would be like if it was like a show that I liked, like Petticoat Junction, that it would come on Canadian TV first. So if it was a show that you really liked, like My Three Sons or something like that, it would come on Canadian TV. But there were some Canadian shows that were very specifically Canadian content, because Canada's very big on Canadian content. They have to have a certain percentage of what they show on CBC or what have you as being born and raised and created in Canada. One show that came on like Saturday morning was called Tiny Talent Time, and it had kids performing. So it was like a talent show for kids. We thought that was pretty cool. But that's the only really Canadian show that I remember the name of the show.
Because there was a couple I know, and one when I bring it up, they know it, and then another one they don't for some strange reason. The Hilarious House of Dr. Frightenstein. A lot of people remember. It was a horror sketch comedy series that Vincent Price narrated, and I interviewed one of the guys whose brother was the producer of it. It lasted like a year, and it became a huge cult phenomenon here in the States. I think they used to air it on PBS or something like that, and the other one's called The Star Lost. It was a Star Trek ripoff with Coeur d'Alene. After 2001: A Space Odyssey, he became disillusioned with being a star out here in the States, so he went back to Canada and started acting over there, and he had this Star Trek ripoff series called The Star Lost, and it's on YouTube.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. No, I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah. And then in the late 70s, John Byner and Bob Einstein, who played Super Dave Osborne, Albert Brooks's brother, they had a series called Bizarre. It was a very raunchy sketch comedy series, and Showtime used to play it. And it was up in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, every Canadian actor in the world was on that show. How they got their start. Saul Rubinek was on there, and God, a lot of people.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean, yeah. So like the Smothers Brothers and like Laugh-In, I mean, they really kicked the countercultural variety show into overdrive. But then by the 70s, so many people were trying to be like those guys, and just they were just so awful. I mean, Mary Tyler Moore had her own variety show after her sitcom was over. There was Donnie and Marie, the Bay City Rollers, Shields and Yarnell, but no one came close to being as good as those shows were, you know?
Yeah, variety shows are tricky. You have to have every element kind of clicking. You've got to have comedy. My favorite was Andy Williams. Mm-hmm. And he did. Andy Williams is not a particularly funny guy, but he did everything right on the version of the Andy Williams show that was on when I was a kid, which would have been late 60s, early 70s. They had writers that were very funny, and Andy was willing to put himself in situations that were wacky. Mm-hmm. And they had something called the Flying Burrito Brothers. I don't know who I don't know who these people were exactly, but to my child mind, it was so silly, funny that I just really appreciated Andy, who's a vocalist, being willing to take part in all of this silliness, and it worked. So for me, that was the gold standard, because his show had been on for so long, and he had discovered the Osmond Brothers and done all this stuff. But in the 70s version of the Andy Williams show was really, it was kind of kooky. There was a bear that would ring doorbells looking for cookies. Mm-hmm. And it was that kind of silliness that went on. So I loved that. And, of course I loved Carol Burnett, and anybody could watch anything on Carol Burnett on repeat and laugh every time. And so those were my favorites.
I just found out a month ago, Mark Maron recorded an interview with Carol Burnett, and it's going to be out soon.
Oh, nice.
I am so looking forward to it. Yeah, he went up to her house and did it, and he played a sample of it. It's going to be a good one, I think.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
that would be the dream. I love Carol.
Yeah. Did you watch the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast?
Yeah, I watched that stuff. I thought that stuff was funny, but it was also, a lot of the humor was very alcoholic.
Yeah.
So it was a booze-soaked kind of thing that didn't hit my funny spot, exactly. Mm-hmm. But I do love watching old school celebrities. So, from that standpoint, I thought, wow, being friends with Burt Reynolds must just about be the coolest thing, Yeah. I don't know if I'm ever going to be sophisticated or interesting enough to have, so for me to have those types of friends, so for me to see the conversations on Johnny Carson was more interesting than, that type of setup, insult, punchline situation. But I know those things are all available now, and and people can watch all those roasts, and so what they did was certainly groundbreaking. But I preferred just a conversation with Johnny. When I ever got old enough to stay up and watch Johnny Carson, that was what sort of taught me what grown up funny banter was all about. And another show, interestingly enough, that influenced me as a child was what was it called? It was that game show where you had to guess who was the real person.
Oh, What's My Line?
Yeah, What's My Line was where you had to guess what they did.
Oh, okay.
But there was one where you had to, where they would say, "Will the real so and so please stand up?"
I know. Yeah. I can't think of it offhand right now, but I know what you're talking about.
Right. So they had the celebrities that were on the panel were very sophisticated people like Kitty Carlisle and Orson Bean, and I just thought that these people were fascinating. You know, Bennett Cerf.
Yep.
You know, those were the type of people that I would have wanted to know, or would want to grow up to aspire to know Bennett Cerf. You know, that was interesting to me, these sophisticates. And I remember thinking they'd always give a reason for, you know, they'd ask questions and they'd pick out, you know, who the real person, you know, try to pick out who the real person was. And they'd always give a reason. And I was using just my childhood intuition. And I thought, I'll never be smart enough to give a reason for why I picked contestant number 3 as the real person. Yeah. And the other thing that I loved was that Orson Bean would always make his number into a drawing. And I just thought, well, that's the cleverest man that ever existed. You know, I would like to know Orson Bean when I grow up. So that was, to me, that was more my ideal than having, you know, a drunken laugh about somebody's bra size. Yeah. I would more aspire to be, you know, friends with the folks that were on, you know, What's My Line or one of these types of shows.
Wow, I never really thought to aspire to be anybody on the game show, but like, yeah, last week I interviewed this game show historian, Adam Neediff. We were talking about his book he just wrote about the Gong Show and stuff. It was a pretty interesting interview. I haven't really done deep dives on game shows before, but I learned a lot, I'll tell you.
Yeah, the show I'm talking about is called To Tell the Truth.
Oh, yes.
And those game shows, What's My Line, To Tell the Truth, I would call those sophisticated game shows. They weren't. I did love the match game. I watched all the match games, 76. I liked all those people that would be on those types of shows, like people that were silly, smart, funny, like, you know, Brett, what was her last name? And Charles Nelson Riley, and you know, all of that, all those people. I liked those folks. I liked that batch of celebrities that would go on those types of afternoon game shows. It was pre-Gong Show, so they weren't crazy silly. They were just engaging silly.
Yeah. Oh my God, the things that Paul Lynde and Charles Nelson Riley got away with on those shows.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, you could get away with it today. You know, I remember someone asked Paul Lynde what the currency of Puerto Rico was. He said, food stamps.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That would not pass the...
Yeah.
But there was a show called Tattletales or something, or Bert Convy, and it would have husbands and wives, and so you'd see Bobby Van and
Charlie Burrow and Mitzi McCall. Yeah.
Yes, I just loved seeing their real life marriage, you know, Steve and Edie, whoever it was. I don't know. It was just, I just loved that kind of stuff. Like seeing smart grown-ups in the entertainment industry was very intriguing to me.
I had Charlie and Mitzi on a couple of years ago, and we were talking about Tattletales, and you know, they had this shtick where you know, Bert Convy would flirt with Mitzi, she would flirt back, and then Charlie would just blow raspberries.
You know, because the spouse would be behind a screen or something, so you know, that they would try to guess what each other were going to say. I like it. To me, it was like a window into being a grown up, and maybe a window into being a smart, funny grown up, and that's what I wanted to be.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's crazy. Your generation was probably the first generation that had board games, right?
I don't know if we were the first generation of board games, but we certainly had a ton of board games. We had Twister. Mm-hmm. We played a lot of board games. So we played. Let's see, what did I like to play? We played there were a lot of silly board games too, like Hands Down was a board game where, like, they would have, some of these board games would have like a contraption, right? Mm-hmm. So if you got a certain type of card, you had to slap this little hand that would make a paddle go down, and then the last person's paddle that was on top, they would get a negative point, right? So there'd be stuff like that going on. And Pop-O-Matic Trouble was another contraption where, like, the dice was in a little globe in the center of the board, and when you popped it, the dice would spin around and then land.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like inventing gadgets, like, G.I. Joe had a kung fu grip, that, things like that. So we loved anything that moved or twisted, or like a slinky. We loved silly putty, because you could do so much with silly putty. Like you could put it on the comics and you peel it off and it would have the comic on the putty. That was fun for hours.
Yeah.
Slinky, the best. For fun, it's the best of a toy.
Slinky, yeah. I mean, that was passed on down the generations. Yeah, I mean, we had Clue. We had Candyland. I never understood that game. I never understood the point of that game. Uno. God, lots of them.
Well, Candyland is baby's first game, and it's pure luck. So to me, it's no fun after like one or two plays. But things like Clue, where you had to use deductive reasoning, yeah, we played Clue over and over again. That's a good example of a game that got a lot of use. And we'd go over to kids' houses on our street, and you just, because half the year it's like almost too cold to play outside in Buffalo. So you just go over to the house across the street, you sit down on the floor, and you play whatever board games they had. So that was a daily occurrence. We played board games every day, I would say. The just tricky part was like when you had a lot of kids in the family was finding all the pieces.
Yeah.
Because they could be anywhere.
We had Monopoly, and when high school and college comes into play, a lot of people play strip Monopoly. When I was in high school, we played naval Monopoly, where if we won a house, we would have to show each other our belly button. If we lost a house, we would have to show each other our belly button, but then we would have to take turns poking it.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Wow, this is getting invasive.
Yeah, well, it was consensual. Everybody knew what they were in for.
I understand.
Do you remember the first album you ever bought with your own money? I think I asked you this before, by the way.
I think I told you the first singles are more of a burnt-in memory, because
yes.
I really need to have the Herb Alpert, This Guy's in Love with You. I needed to have that, and I liked Suspicious Minds, Elvis.
Yeah.
And I really liked Kentucky Rain. He had, that wasn't as big of a hit, but I really, that song had a really real beautifully sad quality to it that I just loved. First album probably would have been something that the Cowsills would have put out, but you remember the first album that you're handed,
yeah,
and it was Hermits, and I loved Herman's Hermits and Meet the Beatles, and those two albums really helped me for between the ages of 5 and 8 pretty good. Like I pretty much just played those two albums, and then once you have enough allowance money to start buying your own records, that's when I'm buying the Cowsills and let's see. What else? The Turtles. Yeah, I loved pop music. So really anything I could get my hands on, but I do remember strongly that the purchase of an album was like the purchase of a car to an adult, because it was so much money that you did it. You really carefully shopped, and you did your homework, you did your research, you did some test studies at other people's homes.
Yeah.
But I was really obsessed with my parents' record collection. So that also, that gave me a lot of music to listen to without having to spend any of my own money, until I was ready. Because I loved the music from my parents' generation, and my parents loved music, so we had a lot of records. And my first favorite group is the Mills Brothers.
Yeah.
And I just became a huge fan of vocal harmony at a very young age. So I was very intrigued by melody harmony. And if any recording had melody harmony, I'm there. That was my jam.
Were you into the Kingston Trio?
Yeah, but that was like the whole folk thing. and that was before my childhood, and it would have been if we had the records. I wouldn't have gone out and bought the Kingston Trio, but when I was in high school, I became obsessed with the Letterman because I loved standards, and they 3-part vocal harmony, and they went back all the way to like the very early 60s. So you could go to the record store and start collecting records as soon as you saved up enough money, because they had such a catalog that had already been produced before I got into them. I got into them when they had the hit record Hurt So Bad and Shangri-La, and they were very handsome. So I loved the Letterman.
Yeah, were they your like first crushes?
No, the Cowsills were my first crush. Actually, my first crush was on Jack Kemp, who was a quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. And then I found out he was a Republican. So, okay. But you move on. And then I loved the Cowsills. And there was this guy there was this TV show for one season called Cowboy in Africa, starring Chuck Connors. Yeah. So I would love to have been at the pitch meeting for this concept. Yeah, there's a cowboy, but he lives in Africa. Yeah. So, and people are nodding. Yeah, say more. So, yeah, he would round up, he would use his cowboy skills to round up emu and whatever else needed tending to out in Africa and Kenya. And there was a guy that worked for him that they called John Henry. Yeah. I think he was supposed to be a native named Tom Nardini, and I just thought.
Yeah, my first was D.B. Jones.
And then the Cowsills, and then the Letterman. Yeah.
Yeah, my first was D.B. Jones. I still love him dearly.
Yeah. No, that's great.
I got to see the Monkees live in 1997.
Oh, you got to see the Monkees live? How did that happen? What happened? Was there a backup band, or how did it work?
No, so this is what happened. There was just the three of them. Michael, of course, wasn't there like he usually was, and they were playing at the Candlestick Park in San Francisco.
Oh, is this recently?
No, 1997.
Yeah, so it was way after. So they do know how to put on a show. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
And they drove off the field in a Cadillac. It was a great show. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm glad you had that experience. I don't think they toured at the time where their show was on the air. So that's why I was.
They did.
Not like David Cassidy. David Cassidy would spend every weekend, touring.
They did a tour with Jimi Hendrix, like in the summer of '67, but that was about it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a famous tour too, because everyone was like, "What? Jimi Hendrix is opening for the Monkees?"
Right.
It was crazy.
Right. I do remember hearing that. I don't know that they had a lot of crossover fans.
I don't think so. But yeah, there's nothing like that stinky, musky smell of vinyl. I just think it's intoxicating. When I was growing up, we had a big old box of records. Everything from the Beatles to the Stones to Johnny Cash live at Folsom Prison, Captain Beefheart's Trout Mask replica. Lots of good stuff.
Yeah, we had a woman that stayed with us, and she was like an au pair from Peru, and she had signed up for the Columbia Record Club, where for 99 cents you get all these records. Mm-hmm. She had excellent taste in music, I'm telling you. Now, my parents are probably still paying the bills for these records, but she went back to Peru, and we're stuck with the bills, but us kids got the records. It's a Supreme's greatest hits catalog, which was 2 or 3 records. Yeah. Man, that would last you in a bomb shelter for years. That stuff was so good. So yeah, we loved Motown, and we just loved, Dionne Warwick, and she had the Association, which was like, I loved, teaching myself the lyrics to Along Comes Mary. I just loved getting deep into a record and really learning every harmony part and making, writing, singing along with my own harmony part that wasn't on the record. That was the stuff you could really study, the way that records were produced. It was just really, these creations were just so epic.
Do you remember your first concert? Oh, it was Peter, Paul, and Mary, right?
Yeah, it was Peter. Well, my parents took us to Peter, Paul, and Mary. Once again, the harmonies. And the way that Mary's voice would cut across.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gorgeous. And let's see then. What else am I thinking about? We get tickets to see Bobby Sherman. He came into Buffalo a lot. Yeah. One time the Cufflinks were opening for him. Yeah. Interesting that, you find out now it was Ron Dante singing the whole time. So, like, who are those people that I saw? I don't know. But we liked those pop songs. And when I got old enough, my brother and I had similar taste in music. And there was a tent outside of Buffalo during the summer called Melody Fair. And you could go see like a in the round version of Hello Dolly with Carol Channing. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was crazy what you got to see. I saw Steve Martin there at Melody Fair in the middle of the Steve Martin craze. So those are some of the memories that my brother and I went to the auditorium, the Buffalo Odd, to see Diana Ross. Mm-hmm. And that was epic. We also went there to see the Bee Gees, in the middle of the whole Saturday Night Fever frenzy. So yeah, I have some really beautiful memories of seeing live events, just the way you do that. They just stay with me.
Absolutely. Like, I had two first concerts. One was Steppenwolf at the county fair, and John Kay was the only original member, and it didn't matter. He was a very charismatic individual. I just loved the show that he put on, and he was really funny telling stories between songs. And then I saw Alice Cooper at the Warfield, and oh my God, that guy is a showman. He was fantastic.
Wow. That's amazing.
How about comedy records?
Well, the Smothers Brothers, and I loved the combination of the music and the comedy, and I played those things on repeat. And then we had all the Steve Martin records, all the Bill Cosby records. It's crushing to learn such a tragic truth about someone that you adored growing up. But I think we have to, even like with what's happening with P. Diddy right now.
Yeah.
A lot of what we've been through with watching our idols crack and fall and be worse than human.
Yeah.
It doesn't take away from what we enjoyed or what mattered to us or what impacted us.
Exactly.
Whether it's the use of language or the music, that still is its own creation. I mean, you could probably pull apart a lot of great classical composers and find all kinds of demonic frailties, but the music is its own creation. So I don't know, it's really hard to put it into perspective, but yes, I loved Bill Cosby. I loved Michael Jackson.
I did too. Yeah. I watched that Bill Cosby himself concert movie a lot growing up, and my mother is still annoyed by it because I remember every line and every routine of it, and it just used to drive her crazy. Every time she came into the room, I'm watching that special.
Yeah, you just want to hear the words. They create their own rhythm in your mind, and it's just something that becomes a part of what informs and creates you, that this is the way this person says this thought, and it's so elegant, and yeah, it just stays with you.
It does. So I'm still enjoying watching Media Path every week and stuff. And you guys have been on fire lately. You've had some great guests. You had Stephen Talbot from Leave It to Beaver, Patrick Laberteau, who you mentioned earlier, David Leisure. I always wondered what happened to him. It was great to get closure. Jerry Mathers and his mom. That was great. I met him last summer at a Comic-Con, and I told him how much I enjoyed that.
Oh, really? That's wonderful. Thank you for shouting out our show to the Beav.
Yeah.
What a great guy, and so much so much wisdom in his soul. He's a remarkable person. It was interesting that his mom remembered so much because he'll just easily say, I was a little boy.
Yeah.
Do you remember being 7, So his mom's like, oh, I remember that day. I'll tell you what happened. And it was so that to me what made it such an interesting such an interesting conversation was that his mom had all those adult insights,
Yeah.
that went right past him because, he had it. That's the only kid who carried a show, who had a show, except for maybe there was that one where the girl was a robot or something. I don't know. But in Leave It to Beaver, the show was named after him. He was the star of the show. He was still in the middle of growing up, and then he had all of those responsibilities. So I could see where he wouldn't remember a lot of detail because it was a lot being asked of him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love the one you guys did with Shelley Herman recently. She's so great. Amazing woman.
Oh, phenomenal. What a great writer. Her book, if people are listening to this and haven't read her book, it's called... What's it called?
My Peacock Tale.
Yeah, My Peacock Tale. It's about her years as an NBC page. And, we had a lot in common because I was a page at the Metro Media lot. Mm-hmm. And we sort of overlapped each other in our paging eras. But she was over at NBC and I was at Metro Media where we did all the Norman Lear sitcoms.
Yeah.
And so we had parallel experiences.
Did you see a lot, though, of what she was talking about with the sexual harassment and all of that?
No, nothing like that ever happened to me.
Okay.
Not even close. Nothing. I'm going to be like Danny Pintaro here. My heart goes out to her and what she experienced, the trauma. Nothing even remotely dangerous ever happened to me or any NBC or any Metro Media page that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I was just like, wow. I mean, yeah, she had some very interesting Zelig-like experiences during that time.
Oh yeah.
How long were you there for?
I was at Metro Media Square for 1 year, mm-hmm. and then I was hired by a show called PM Magazine.
Yeah.
Which was on the lot, and we had a cavernous little office suite underneath the soundstage where they had done the John Davidson talk show that I was a page for. When I went to PM Magazine, they were now doing Alan Thicke, Thick of the Night. This is where I heard some horror stories from people that were him.
Wow.
So we'll say no more since it's third person.
Yeah.
But that was a place where you started to hear some dark stuff.
Yeah. I mean, he had that show, Thick of the Night. That's
what it was.
Yeah. He had that show. I watched that show and I'm like, wow, there's humor on this show you couldn't get away with today. I'm like, I don't even know how this show, got on.
Yeah, I don't know whether or not I watched it or whether or not I just experienced it because our offices were underneath his stage and, you could walk through the sound stage and I knew a lot of people that worked on the show and some interesting stuff happened. Like, and just stop me if I've told you this story before, but I just love the story. It's because it makes me smile. This little boy came around the corner to my little office at PM Magazine, and he was like, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" I'm talking to him, and we had all these PM Magazine stories on videotape. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, there's a conference room and a VHS machine. It was like 3/4 inch tape. It wasn't like a home VHS. It was like the industry standard." I said, "You want me to show you some? You can sit here if you're." He said, "My mom works on wardrobe at Thick of the Night," and I go, "Well, I'll set you up in front of the TV. You can watch some stuff." He's like, "Can I go get my friend?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So he comes back and he goes, "My friend wants to know whether or not you're pretty." And I said, "Well, you should tell him that I'm glorious. I'm enchanting. I'm like 25. I don't feel pretty, but I just thought that was a weird thing for an 8-year-old to be asking of another 8-year-old." And he comes back with an 8-year-old Robin Thicke. Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Oh, so it's Thicke's kid. Yeah, that tracks. He needs to know whether or not I'm pretty before he'll come hang out in our conference room." But then, of course, he grew up to become Robin Thicke.
Wow. I think I heard you tell it on another podcast, but it did sound a little familiar. But yeah, wow. Yeah, and I can say, being that I'm a bisexual man, Louise, you are pretty.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if maybe 8-year-old Robin Thicke came around the corner and was like, I am disappointed. I don't know, but I don't know how pretty you need to be to an 8-year-old boy, honestly. Like, I've got some cartoons to show you guys. Either you're interested or go back to your own boring soundstage.
So do you have?
But I love kids, and so I just kind of meet them where they are. Like, no judgment coming out of me. Just like whatever his needs were in that moment. Mm-hmm. He was thinking this is how you become a man. I think he was just mirroring what he saw.
Exactly. So do you have any good toe curlers coming up as far as guests go?
Let me look at our calendar. What should have posted this morning was an interview with a comedian named Ivan Decker. Mm-hmm. Hilarious, charming, delightful. I would say he's the next Jim Gaffigan, but he is his own person. So let me pull up my calendar because the power was off when I started this phone call. Now the power's back on. Mm-hmm. So my calendar is not ignited. Here we go. Let's see. Next week we have a guy that wrote, his name is, he writes books about celebrities, and he wrote, his most recent book is about Troy Donahue. Now, mind you, this is interesting about Troy Donahue because I'm reading the book and I'm like, okay, but when are you going to tell us about, his struggles with, being gay? And I just keep reading, and like he's going at girls, he's chasing this girl, he's chasing that girl. It's like, who is this author, and why are they ignoring, that this Troy Donahue is gay? Like, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. So finally, after reading like a bunch of chapters, I go to Troy Donahue's Wikipedia page. Yeah. And it's like this wife, and I'm like, what is up? And then all of a sudden my brain went, oh, Troy Donahue and Tab Hunter are completely different people.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of people thought that Troy Donahue was gay.
Well, everybody thinks that they're the same person. Like, I started to tell my husband this story, and he's like, no, but Troy Donahue's gay. And I'm like, wait, no, he's not Tab Hunter. And my husband went, oh, my God. Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. He's not Tab Hunter. I don't know that people distinguished. Yeah. So now I'm at a part in the book where he gets with the same manager dude. Did you see that like miniseries about Hollywood? Forget what it was called, but it was kind of about this era where it was this one manager like who discovered Rock Hudson, and you had to sleep with him for him to get you roles or to put you up for roles and stuff like that. So I'm at the part in the book where Troy Donahue, and then he names these people. He gives them these like really rough sounding names like Rock Hudson. That guy's name was, I forget what, but Roy or something, Yeah. So Troy Donahue's real name was Merle Johnson. Yeah. And he just would pull names out of phone books. I don't know. He named him Troy Donahue. But he gets with this same manager guy who was hitting on all the guys. Mm-hmm. I mean, really inappropriate conduct in the 50s, but it was an era where the movie stars were, the Technicolor movies were coming out, and I guess they wanted people that just looked amazing, up on the big screen. And Troy was one of those guys. Wow. So that's next week. We have the author's name is Michael Greg Michaud, and he writes books about celebrities. I know him. I
know him. We did a Sal Mineo deep dive a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Sal Mineo. So yeah, then we have Kevin Pollak.
Oh, love Kevin Pollak.
Yeah. And then what is this? I think I don't know what we've got booked past then, but that's the immediate future.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah. Wow, I can't wait for that Troy Donahue one. Yeah, that's going to be pretty interesting. Wow.
Yeah, you can start reading the book. It's called Inventing Troy Donahue, and it's got a lot of interesting, let's see, what's the name of the book? Inventing Troy Donahue. Yeah. The Making of a Movie Star. He's super handsome, Troy Donahue.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, people would get him and Tab Hunter and Doug McClure all mixed up because they were blonde, blue eyes. Yeah.
Doug McClure, man, that was one of my childhood crushes. The Virginian, right?
Yes, the Virginian, and he was in the first Gidget movie. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love the Gidget movies. Those were so fun.
Same here. I'm a big Gidget guy, and when I talked to Bruce Belland of the Four Preps,
Yeah,
I brought it up. He didn't remember much about making it because it was so long ago, but he has people coming to him all the time saying, "Yeah, remember the Four Preps from the Gidget movie."
I love Bruce. He's just like my guy. I love him.
Wonderful man, wonderful.
Yep,
So
yep. And
real,
his book, if you're listening to this and you don't know that Bruce Belland from the Four Preps has a book that
yeah,
is like that should become a movie this afternoon. It is. He grows up in Hollywood and has the most enchanting experiences and creates himself. He takes full advantage of being where he is as
hmm
a child, and then he creates the Four Preps and he creates his future, and it's just absolutely delightful.
yeah, I'm gonna definitely get a copy of that.
Oh
So
my God, Tommy, this is your book.
yeah,
You are gonna love it.
yeah, because when we talked a couple of years ago, he told me he was finishing writing it and stuff. So yeah,
Yeah,
I've been
you should have him. Yeah, have him back on. He's just. I got to introduce him to the son of one of the Mills brothers because Bruce adored the Mills brothers, and my family was friends with the Mills brothers. So I got to have a show where I introduced him to John Mills, the son of Donald Mills, and he just fanboyed out. It was so wonderful.
I love Haley Mills.
They are not related that I'm aware of, but we
John
could
Mills,
skip.
John Mills
We'll
and
get
Haley Mills,
no Donald. His name is John Mills, which is I'm sure a very common name,
a different John
but
Mills. Okay,
yeah, the son of Donald Mills of the Mills brothers.
gotcha. So real quick, we got to play my secret silly game. This is a series of silly slumber party questions. It's no win or lose, it's just pure fun. And how the game
Uh-huh.
works is, Louise, I ask you the question, you answer it, and then you ask me that exact same question and I answer it. And feel free to comment on the answers because they might be funny.
Okay.
I'm sure your answers are going to be hilarious. Louise, are you ticklish?
Yes. Tommy, are you ticklish?
Yes. If you tickle me without warning, though, I might hit you in the groin.
Okay. You'll always be warned.
Okay. Is your belly button an innie or an outie?
Innie.
Okay.
Is your belly button an innie or an outie, Tommy?
It is also an innie.
That's because so many people poked it while you were playing that game.
Yeah. Exactly. What color are your toenails painted?
They are not painted.
Okay.
What color are you toenails?
Right now they are not painted, but last time they were. They were gold with sparkles for New Year's Eve.
Nice.
I like to go elaborate.
Nice palette.
What would you say is your best personality trait?
My interest in others.
Absolutely.
Oh, Tommy,
Yeah.
what would you say is your best personality trait?
I have empathy and I have no filter.
I love that you see strength. That's strong.
I'm a Gemini.
Yeah, love.
And then my favorite question, is there a stinky smell that just makes you gag?
Maybe ammonia.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
If you're going to go all the way to gagging, I think you got to go with ammonia, right?
Yeah.
How about you, Tommy? Is there a stinky smell that makes you gag?
Either farts or feet.
Ooh, so we don't want that kind of lethal combo in the same dating partner, right?
Yeah, no, never. Oh my God. I got to experience it one time on a date with this girl years ago. I think in hindsight she may have been a crystal meth addict because she had bad breath, stinky feet, and those are usually the characteristics of a crystal meth addict.
Yeah, I'm sure they can impact your aroma.
Yeah. Louise, you are so awesome. Thank you for nerding out with me today. It's always great talking with you.
I loved it. Thank you, Tommy. You're wonderful.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I will check out those books you recommended, and I will keep on listening to Media Path, keep on having wonderful guests, and happy Easter, and be safe out there.
Okay, the same to you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Louise Palanker, ain't she a sweetheart? Oh my god, I love her. She is so awesome. And I'm so glad we could nerd out on pop culture today. Just take a look at her podcast on YouTube with Fritz Coleman, Media Path podcast. It is awesome. The baby boomer pop culture icons that they have is just fabulous. Well, until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying there's no shame in living in the past because the present sucks. Later, dudes.